Hello, welcome to a special mukbang edition of my class. So I got some food. Unfortunately, I didn't eat fast enough for it to be done by the time I got to the reading. But here we are, and I am not going to not eat. So I will be taking breaks every once in a while to have some of this delicious pho soup and get to the book. There we go. Hey, Jerry. So those of you that are just joining me, I'm still in the middle of my lunch, so I might take occasional breaks to eat. You guys may eat with me if you have something to snack on. In the meantime, let's get back to the book. We are on chapter 11, the Nautilus. So quick recap, we have our main character. It's called Pho, P-H-O. It's kind of a soup. It is so good. You eat it, it has like cilantro and beef and noodles, and it's so good. Anyway, so we are aboard the Nautilus, which is basically a giant submarine. It was more advanced than anything else that was made at the time. This is in the 1800s, late 1800s. The captain doesn't want to give his name. He speaks a language that the heroes don't understand, but he speaks a bunch of different languages. When we get back, Jerry, maybe I'll bring some. So we know that he speaks perfect French, except he sounds like he's not from France. So they can tell that he's not from there, even though he doesn't speak with an accent. We also know that he speaks a different language. There are some theories about where he came from. I'll get to that once we get a little bit later on. But all we know for sure is that he has declared that he does not want to be a part of humanity anymore, and that he and his crew have decided that they're going to live away from human laws and human contact under the sea. So they welcome the three people that are with them from the American ship, which are the Canadian Ned Land, he's a harpooner, the Professor Pierre Arnaud, who's our main character, and Conseil, who is his servant. So Captain Nemo got up. I followed him. Contrived at the rear end of the dining room, a double door opened, and I went into the room with the same dimensions as the one I just left. It was a library. I like pizza. I had pizza last night, Jerry. Nice. Tall bookcases made of black rosewood inlaid with brass held on their wide shelves a large number of uniformly bound books. These furnishings followed the contours of the room, and at their base were huge couches upholstered with chestnut leather, curved for maximum comfort. Light, movable reading stands could be pushed or pulled closer at will, and books could be placed on them for easy study. In the center stood a huge table covered with pamphlets. Among some of the out-of-date newspapers were visible. Electric light flooded this whole pleasing picture, falling from the frosted half-globes set on the scrollwork of the ceiling. I looked with genuine wonderment at this room that was so cleverly laid out I couldn't believe my eyes. Captain Nemo, I told my host, who had just stretched out on a couch. This library would do credit to several places on land, and I'm truly amazed to think that it can go into the deepest seas with you. Where could you find greater solitude or silence, Professor? Captain Nemo replied. Did your study at the museum offer you such a perfect retreat? Captain Nemo, no, sir. I must say that it's a humble one next to yours. You have 6,000 or 7,000 volumes here. 12,000, Professor Arnaud. They are the only ties I have left to the shore. But I was done with dry land the day that my Nautilus submerged for the first time under waters. That day, I bought my last volumes, my last pamphlets, and my last newspapers. And ever since, I've chosen to believe that human beings no longer think or write. In any event, Professor, these books are at your disposal, and feel free to use them. It's hot over here, Jerry, as well. Very hot. I thanked Captain Nemo and went up to the shelves of his library. Written in every language, books on science, ethics, and literature were there in profusion, but I didn't see a single work on economics. They seemed to be strictly banned on board. One odd detail, all these books were shelved indiscriminately without any regard for any language in which they were written, and the jumble showed that the Nautilus's captain could read fluently any volume that he happened to pick up. Among the books, I noticed masterpieces by the great ancient and modern times. In other words, all of mankind's finest achievements in history. Poetry, fiction, and science, from Homer to Victor Hugo, Xenophon to Michelet, from Rabelais and Madame George to Madame George Sand. George, George? You too, Jerry. I saw the complete works of Humboldt, all of Argot, works by Foucault, Henry Saint-Clair, Deville, Chasselet, Milne Edwards, Quatrefages, John Tyndall, Faraday, Bertholt, Father Secchi, Peterman, Commander Maury, Louis Agassiz, and as well as transactions of the French Academy of Sciences, bulletins from various geographical societies, and in prime location, those two volumes of The Great Ocean Depths that maybe had earned me comparatively warm welcome by Captain Nemo. So in other words, he has some of the professor's books as well. That's why that's why the captain likes him so much. Hence, Captain Nemo had begun his underwater existence 3 years ago at most. Moreover, I hope that some of the more recent books would let me pin down the date exactly. But I had plenty of time to look for them when I didn't want to put off any longer our stroll through the Nautilus's wonders. You too, Jerry. Don't worry, I've been washing my hands. I got Lysol for everything. By the way, who else is in here? Please feel free to say hi, introduce yourself, let me know who you are. I can see already that there's two people on here, so it's somebody else besides Jerry. Say hi, let me know how you're doing. That's why we're here. So, sir, I told the captain, thank you for putting this library at my disposal. There are scientific treasures here, and I'll make the most of them. This room isn't just a library, Captain Nemo said. It's also a smoking room. A smoking room, I exclaimed. Then people may smoke on board? Surely. In that case, I'm forced to believe that you've been keeping up relations for Havana. Havana is where the best cigars in the world are made, well, in Cuba in general. If I did have Corona, it wouldn't matter because, I can't give it to you through a webcam. Excuse me. None whatever, the captain replied. Try the cigar, Professor Aronow, and even though it doesn't come from Havana, you'll enjoy it as though you're a connoisseur. I accepted the cigar he offered me, whose shape I recalled from those of Cuba, but it looked like it was made of gold leaf. I lit it at a small brazier, sitting in a stylish bronze stand, and took my first draws with the relish of a smoker who hadn't had a puff in 2 days. It's excellent, I said, but this isn't from the tobacco plant. No, Captain replied. This tobacco doesn't come from either Cuba or the East. It's a sort of nicotine-rich seaweed which the open supplies me. Sparingly, I'm afraid. Do you still miss your Havanas, sir? Captain, I'll sneer on them from this day forward. Then smoke these cigars whenever you like, without quibbling about their origin. They don't need the government seal of approval, but I imagine they're none the worse for it. I'm just playing. On the contrary, just then, Captain Nemo opened the door facing the one I entered through the library, and I went in an immense, splendidly lit lounge. Whoever else is here, please say hi in the chat. I want to know who you are. I want to know how you're doing. It's just been me and Jerry here for so long. It was a huge rectangle with canted corners, 35 feet long, 20 wide, and 16 high, decorated with delicate arabesques, an illuminated ceiling shed of a soft, clear daylight, over which all the wonders gathered on this museum. For a museum it truly was, in which clever hands had spared no expense to accumulate every natural and artistic treasure, displaying them with a helter-skelter picturesqueness that marks a painter's studio. Some 30 pictures by masters, uniformly framed and separated gleaming pantopiles of arms, adorned walls, which stretched tapestries of austere design. There I saw canvases of the highest value, the likes of which I had marveled at in private European collections and art exhibitions. The various schools of old masters were represented by a Raphael Madonna, a Virgin by Leonardo da Vinci, a nymph by Correggio, a woman by Titian, in adoration of the Magi by Veronese, an Assumption of the Virgin by Murillo, a Holbein portrait, a monk by Velázquez, a martyr by Ribera, and a fair bit of Rubens, 2 French landscapes by Teniers, 3 small genre paintings by Gerard Dow, Metsu, Paul Potter, 2 canvases by Géricault, Prouton, plus seascapes by Bacusin and Vernet. By the way, I am not an artist. I don't know a lot of these. But let's just assume that they're some well-known artists from the time. The only ones I recognize are like Velázquez and Leonardo da Vinci and Raphael. Professor, the strange man said, you must excuse the informal way I've welcomed you, as well as the disorder reigning in this lounge. Sir, I replied, without prying into your identity, might I call you an artist? A collector, sir, nothing more. In the past, I loved acquiring these beautiful works created by the hand of man. I hunted them greedily, ferreted them out tirelessly, and I was able to gather some objects of great value. They're my last memories of those shores that are now dead to me. In my eyes, your modern artists are already as old as the ancients. They've existed for 2,000 or 3,000 years, and I mix them up in my mind. The masters are ageless. What about the composers? I said, pointing to the sheet music by Weber, Rossini, Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, Meyerbeer, Harold, Wagner, Abner, Gounod, Victor Massey, and a number of others scattered over an ultra-large piano organ that took up one of the wall panels in this lounge. You know what? I haven't been able to find hand sanitizer, Jerry, anywhere. These composers, Captain Nemo answered me, are the contemporaries of Orpheus, because all chronological differences fade in the annals of the dead. And I too am dead, Professor, just as dead as those friends of yours sleeping 6 feet under. Captain Nemo fell silent, and I felt he was lost in some deep reverie. I regarded him with an intense emotion, quietly analyzing his strange facial features, leaning his elbow on every corner of the valuable mosaic table. He no longer saw me. He had forgotten my very presence. I didn't dare disturb his meditations, but continued my inspection of the curiosities adorning his lounge. After works of art, natural rarities were the main attraction. They consisted chiefly of plants, shells, and other exhibits from the ocean that must have been the Captain Nemo's own personal finds. In the middle of the lounge, an electrically lit jet of water fell back into the basin of a single giant clam. The delicately festooned rim of the shell, supplied by the biggest mollusk in the class Acephala, measured by 20 feet around. So it was even bigger than those fine giant clams that given King Francois I by the Republic of Venice. Clams whose shells the Church of the San Sulpice in Paris made those two gigantic holy water fonts. I mean, I'm still washing my hands with soap and water, Jerry. That's about the only way I can do it. Around the basin, inside the stylish glass reinforced with brass fastenings, were classified and labeled the most valuable marine exhibits ever put to the eyes of a naturalist. As you can imagine, I was in a state of academic ecstasy. Remember, Professor Aronow is a marine biologist. The zoophyte branch offered some highly unusual specimens from its two groups, the polyps and the echinoderms. In the first group, organ pipe coral, Gorgian fan coral, soft sponges from Syria, coral of the genus Isis from the Molucca Islands, sea-pin coral, wonderful coral of the genus Bulgaria from the waters of Norway, various coral and genus of Umbellaria, some octocoral, and then a full series of madrepores that my mentor, Professor Milne Edwards, had so shrewdly classified into divisions, among which I noted the captivating genus Flabellina, the genus Oculina from the Reunion Islands, and the Neptune's chariot from the Caribbean Sea. Every magnificent variety of coral, and in short, all the pieces of these unusual polypores that congregate to form the entire islands, which turn to continents someday. Among the echinoderms, notable for being covered with spines, some starfish and sand stars, feather stars, sea lilies, basket stars, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, represented a complete collection of the individuals of the group. They have to be. I mean, somebody's got to be here, Jerry. Like every day that we've done this, there's always been two people in here. I know one of them's you, so there's got to be somebody else. Amor, are you on my YouTube?
No, I'm not on your YouTube.
It's not her, so it's got to be somebody else. An excitable conchologist would surely have fainted dead away in front of this and many other glass cases, in which were the classified specimens from the mollusk branch. There I saw a collection of incalculable value I hadn't had time to describe completely. Among the exhibits, I'll mention just for the record, an elegant royal hammer shell from the Indian Ocean, its uniform white spots standing out sharply against the background of red and brown. An imperial thorny oyster, brightly colored, garnished with spines, a specimen rare to European museums, and whose value I put at $4,000. A common hammer shell from the seas near Australia, very hard to come by. Exotic cockles from Senegal, fragile white bivalve shells that with a single breath could pop like soap bubbles. Several varieties of watering can shells from Java, a sort of limestone tomb fringed with leafy folds was fought over by many collectors. A whole series of top shells, greenish yellow ones from the American seas, the other colored reddish brown and patronizing the waters off of Australia. The former coming from the Gulf of Mexico and notable for their overlapping shells, the latter of which, the sun carrier shells, can be found in the southernmost seas. Finally, and most rare of all, the magnificent spur shell from New Zealand. Then, marvelous cells from the species Telina sulpharia, some valuable species of smooth clams and Venus shells, trellis-like sundial snails from Tranquebar on India's East Ocean, a mottled turban shell snail, gleaming with a mother of pearl, green parrot shells from the seas of China, all but unknown cone shell from the genus Coadelia, every variety of cowrie used as money in India and Africa, and a glory of the seas, the most valuable shell in the East Indies. Finally, periwinkle snails from the genus Delphinulia, screw shells, purple snails, egg cowries, volvulus shells, olive shells, miter shells. I'm just gonna go ahead and skip all this because it's getting a little boring. It's actually my fiance. Hey babe.
I'm busy, babe.
Oh, she can't come right now. Maybe tomorrow she'll come by. Aside and in special compartments, strings of supremely beautiful pearls lay spread out, the electric light flanking them with little fiery sparks. Pink pearl extracted from seawater fan shells in the Red Sea, green pearls from the Blackfoot Albany, yellow, blue, ebony pearls, unusual handwork of various mollusks of every ocean, and certain mussels from rivers up north. In short, several specimens of incalculable value that had been oozed by the rarest of shellfish. Some of these pearls were bigger than a pigeon's egg, and
Whoa.
they equaled that one that the explorer Tanavier sold to the Shah of Persia for $600,000, and they surpassed every other pearl owned by the Imam of Muscat, which I thought was unmatched in all the world. Hence, it is literally impossible to calculate the value of this collection. Captain Nemo had to have spent millions in acquiring these different specimens, and I was wondering what financial resources he tapped into to satisfy his collector's fancy when these words interrupted me. You're examining my shells, Professor. Certainly they're of interest to a naturalist, but for me, they have an added charm because I've collected each one of them with my own two hands, and not a sea on the globe has eluded my investigations. I understand, Captain. I understand your delight in strolling in the midst of all this wealth. You're a man who gathers treasure in person. No museum in Europe has such a vast collection of exhibits from the ocean. But if I use up all my wonderment on that, there won't be anything left for the vessel itself. I don't want to pry into those secrets of yours, but I confess my curiosity is aroused to a fever pitch by this Nautilus, whose motor power it contains, the equipment allowing it to operate, the ultra powerful force that it brings to life. I see some instruments hanging on the walls of this lounge, and their purpose is unknown to me. Might I learn? Professor Aronow, Captain Nemo answered me. I've said you'll be free aboard my vessel, so no part of the Nautilus is out of bounds for you. You may give it a detailed inspection, and I'll be delighted to act as your guide. I can't thank you enough, sir, but I don't want to abuse your good nature. I'll ask you only about those instruments used for physical measure. Professor, these same instruments are also in my stateroom, where I'll have the pleasure of explaining their functions to you. But beforehand, come and inspect the cabin I've set up for you. You need to learn how you're going to be lodged aboard the Nautilus. I followed Captain Nemo, who went through one of the doors cut into the lounge's canted corners, then led me back to the ship's corridor. He took me to the bow, and then, instead of just a cabin, I found a stylish stateroom with a bed, a washstand, and other furnishings. I could only thank my host. Your stateroom adjoins mine, he said, opening a door, and mine leads into the lounge we've just left. I went into the captain's stateroom. It had an austere, almost monastic appearance. An iron bedstead, a work table, some washstand aperturances, subdued lighting, no luxuries, just the bare necessities. Captain Nemo showed me a bench. Kindly be seated, he told me. I sat, and he started to speak as follows. But you'll have to find out next time. Jerry, thank you for sticking around with me. Who else is in here before we leave? I please introduce yourself so I know you're not a ghost.
Right for the weekend.
No? All right. Well, I'm gonna enjoy the rest of this food. Jerry, mystery person, y'all take care of yourselves, and I will see you guys tomorrow. All right? Peace.